Welcome to Scoop World Order. We are getting close to football, ladies and gentlemen. Media Days are coming up next Wednesday. We're going to talk a little bit about what is going on at Media Days. They're in Indianapolis now. Used to be in Chicago back when they were super sweet. And well, that just kind of signals the last thing before training camp starts. It usually comes off about a week or so, 10 days or before we start camp up. So camp's going to be here. Talk a little about who Ohio State is sending to Media Days. What does it mean for them? We're just going to get this thing correct up. We're going to take your questions. We have some really good inside information on BuckeyeScoop.com that we're going to talk about. But yeah, we're going to get this thing fired up. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you guys so much. We are almost to 20,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. Keep clicking that like button. Keep clicking subscribe. Send it to any of your friends that are diehard Ohio State fans. We appreciate you guys pushing out our content. Thank you for your help. If you enjoy our live shows, click that little bell. You'll get alert. I want to know, who are your picks for captains for the 2023 Buckeyes? Write that in the comments down below. Appreciate you guys as always. I love your input. Read everything you guys write. It's always great stuff. Appreciate that so much. With that being said, I'm going to bring in the captain of the ship, Mr. Nevadabuck. Nevada, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Getting excited about 20,000 subscribers on YouTube, man. It's like, like when you see people like Jake Paul, these guys that have millions and millions, you don't realize how hard it is to get this. And we've
Sure.
grinded for every single subscriber, and to get to 20,000, we're gonna have a big show celebrating the 20,000 subscriber. We're not sure exactly what we're gonna do, but it's gonna be wild. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be zany. It will rival the tree induction ceremony that Mr. Barton went through when he got his All-American tree in the Grove, and may even make up for the disappointment of not having a tree induction ceremony for Mr. Barton. But it's gonna be awesome and spectacular, and ready to talk. We had a great nugget from the helping technician. We got some
Oh my
stuff with
God.
Media Day, so yeah, so we got stuff going all over the place. So let's get after it.
So Media Day, back in the olden days, the Trestle days, we used to generally only send seniors. Usually send three guys. Usually, a couple from one side of the ball, but you always had a representative, at least one from each side of the ball. Each team gets to bring three guys. My senior year, it was me, Marcus Freeman, and Vernon Golson were the three. Now, with the way guys are going pro and a push towards, pushing the starters, this year Ohio State is sending Marvin Harrison, no surprise, Cade Stover, JT Tui, Maloal. So Nevada, what do you make of that? A lot of times you can kind of read the tea leaves that those guys are cinched to be captains, especially now that we've really moved towards having junior captains, especially these guys that are high level guys like Marvin and JT. What do you make of the guys that Ryan selected to go to Media Day?
Well, I mean, it's yeah. The Cade one to me is obvious. The Marvin Harrison one kind of speaks for itself. The JT one is interesting, because I thought he had a decent year last year, and I think what's interesting about him is, we've talked about this before, but if you subtract his stats from the Penn State game, which might have been the greatest defensive performance by any Ohio State player, considering everything, I think it was like 3 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions. And I mean, it was just an absurd stat line. But when you take that away, he really didn't do much for the year. So it shows me that they clearly think highly of him. And I mean, the obvious question that I have is, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, or maybe I'm not understanding it. No Tommy Eichenberg.
See, I bet you Ryan probably went to Tommy and asked him if he wanted to go. Tommy's not real talkative. He's not a big media guy. He's not a hyperactive social media guy or anything like that. So I would bet Tommy turned it down. And probably said, "Hey, do you want to send JT?" I would imagine Ryan probably asked him, just because Tommy's a preseason All-American. He's an older guy. He's a senior. I mean, he's got, he was a better player than JT was last year from a production standpoint. So I would imagine Tommy probably turned it down because Tommy hates the media. He hates talking to the media. He's dealing with the media. I, on the other hand, like when I was asked to go, like I felt kind of like a duty to go, because I had to explain, we had to go after that Florida loss. Like these guys, like media day isn't fun for these guys, especially coming off the Michigan beat down, losing to Georgia last second. Like you basically have to go rip open the scab because you're going to have, if there's, 150 credentialed journalists there, they only want to talk to Ohio State and Michigan. Like nobody cares about Indiana or Purdue or, Rutgers. Like, I mean, those guys have like two people on their beat. Like Ohio State, you get every beat writer from Columbus, which is the largest beat in the country. Then you also get all the beat writers that are from all the other schools that want to talk to the superstars. They all want to talk to Marvin. They all want to talk to JT. They all want to talk to Cade. And Cade, I know he gets a little frosty when it comes, hey, how'd you guys get spanked by Michigan again? Like it's not just fun going to the media day, but you have to take the tough questions. Like something that I always prided myself on is if we get smoked, like, I was in the locker room, in those national championship games, like something that's really different about national championship games, it's not like any other game, is the media is in the locker room right after the game. Like 10 minutes after the game, the media is in the locker room. And there's no other, for whatever reason, there's no other game that's like that. So like when we lost to Florida, like 15 minutes after the game was over, like the media like swarmed the locker room. And like normally like in college football, they're not allowed in the locker room. The NFL, it's different. But for whatever reason, those national championship games, those guys, I mean, there was 150 people in our locker room after those losses. And I didn't run from anything, and there were a lot of guys that ran. A lot of guys, they didn't want to talk. They didn't want to meet. They didn't want to say anything. And I didn't care because I was like, if I'm going to be in front of the microphone after a win, I better be here after one of these, these beat downs that we experience. Because in football, the beautiful thing about football is everybody gets beat down. Nick Saban gets beat down, Belichick, Brian Kelly, Ryan Day, Jim Harbaugh. Everyone's been whooped in football. Nobody's immune to that. But it's interesting to see how people react to the whooping. So for these guys that are going, it's kind of going to be, and they know what they're walking into. It's going to be a trap door. It's going to be guys asking about losing to Michigan and having to go to Ann Arbor again, and they're loaded in Michigan, and how much pressure do you feel, and is Ryan Day's job safe? And it's kind of like walking through the minefield when you deal with these media people, because they're all trying to get a quote. They're all trying to get something out of you, and you can't give it to them. You got to be cool, calm, friendly, but not give them anything that's too incendiary that could hurt your team or your teammates or whatever. Nevada, do you get anything out of media day? You probably don't, 'cause you probably don't care. But I mean, do you what is it to you? I mean, have you ever really paid attention to media day over the past 15 years?
When I think of media day, I think of Super Bowl I, where you've got Len Dawson sitting on like a folding chair in the locker room, smoking a cigarette at halftime or something like that. And I think about that's what media day should be like, or something like that. It should be like in a bar or something, and just kind of have people hanging out, having cocktails or drinking a rum runner or something like that with like a plastic umbrella in it. I just think that would be a much better type of media day experience, because you're right. All the guys are in there. They're coached up not to give any bulletin board material to your rival, not to say anything too provocative, not do anything that hurts your view or sets off some sort of social media sensation, or puts you in the eye of the storm with the lynch mob. So no, I think Tommy probably. I think you're probably right. I mean, Tommy is notable by his absence, though. I mean, it is. I mean, when you've got a guy that's I mean, I would imagine he's going to be a consensus All-American linebacker this year, probably the favorite to win the Butkus, and he's a senior, and he's not there. And that's odd, but I think your explanation makes as much sense as any, and that's probably spot on. But yeah, probably only downside to going and opening your mouth at media D. Not a lot of good things can happen, and an awful lot of bad.
Yeah, it's tough because you have people that could really try to not incite you, but people that are from other sites that aren't on the Ohio State beat. I mean, they could say anything to try to get a quote out of you. Because when you look at the star power in the Big Ten, I mean, Michigan's sending Blake Corum, but that's kind of it. I mean, there's no Braylon Allen's coming from Wisconsin. I guess like with Luke coming, it'll be different. But then you look at Ohio State, it's Marvin Harrison, consensus All-American, top player in the country, and JT Tuimoloau. Like, I mean, so the star power is all around Ohio State. So, but again, I think that I feel bad for these kids that it's not in Chicago, because when it was in Chicago, it was sweet. Like I went to a Cubs game the night we got there. That was awesome. Now it's in Indy, which kind of sucks. I know the Big Ten's trying to keep everything at the Lucas Oil Stadium and all that, but it sucks not being in Chicago. Chicago's way more fun than Indy is. But it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I'm sure it'll just be the same vanilla album, which is why, I mean, it was different with Urban. Urban, I mean, he was always a lot more spicy. But now, like, it's just so vanilla that it's hard to watch. You really don't glean anything from these, because I mean, Ryan Gas, do you feel pressure about beating Michigan? Yes. What have you guys changed anything coming off the two losses? Yes. We're tougher and meaner and more leadership, and we do feng shui in the morning or something. I don't know. So I mean, you're not really going to get much out of that. But I'm going to spawn this into our friend, the humping technician, finally came back. We got him rolling, and we're going to pivot into some good news. It says that we're turning the heat up on Marquise Lightfoot, a kid that everybody basically had locked into Ohio State. 11th hour, he flips to Miami. Talk a little bit about what he said, because that was really interesting to me, because, I'm just always from the school in modern football, you have to keep recruiting these kids, because Miami could go 2-10, and anything could happen. They could be under sanctions. They could, anything can happen. So you keep recruiting these kids, a lot like Chip Kelly in Oregon and Dontre Wilson. I'll never forget that one. But what did the humping technician say about Marquise Lightfoot? This was interesting.
I said we're still very much in the game, and that communication is still very much going on, and that the big NIL deal that was promised to Lightfoot is back end loaded, which would seem to be third and fourth year types of incentives for him to hang around, and that he felt that was one that was still gettable, and it makes sense to me, as you said, because Ohio State was long been the leader. I think there was a little bit of a snafu on the NIL standpoint for Ohio State, and I think Miami stepped into the breach with this offer, and I think he kind of got enamored with it and made a decision. But I think that there's some definite reconsideration going on, and the fact that Ohio State's still in the game, I took that as a very, very positive, because helping technicians pretty conservative when it comes to this kind of stuff, and when he talks about this, he knows of what he speaks. So I'd say let's keep an eye on Marquise Lightfoot, not knock this one off of our recruiting list yet, because we still might not be done.
Yeah, and like, again, I always go back to the Dontre Wilson thing. He was locked into Oregon. There's a lot of slime going on between his coach, DeSoto, and Chip Kelly. And, Chip took the golden parachute out of there before the nuclear bomb went off on Oregon. But Dontre, as soon as Chip left, it was open season. He ends up flipping to Ohio State. We never stopped recruiting him. And again, that's, from 15 years ago, it's a seismic shift to where recruiting used to be the gentleman's agreement, leave the kids alone. Like, none of that exists anymore. And even modern kids, when they commit, it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, they're just they're committed unless they get a better option. It's kind of like modern, like, dating with, like, your Bumble or Tinder or whatever. It's like people just all kind of are in a holding pattern until they get the best possible option. And that's what it's like in recruiting. Because, I mean, coaches always get fired. Coaches always go up to the NFL. Position coaches leave. Guys get promoted, demoted, whacked. And if there's a substantial relationship there that you can upset, then, go after the kid. I mean, there's no reason not to. I mean, he loves Jason Taylor, but if the Miami Dolphins call Jason Taylor tomorrow, he's gone. He's going to the league. He doesn't want to coach in college. He doesn't want to deal with recruiting and NIL. Like, guys that are pro guys getting into coaching, they all want to coach in the NFL. I mean, even Brian Hartline said, I'm an NFL guy at heart. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, people, when they say, oh, Brian's going to be a wide receiver coach until he's 85 years old, coaching for the old Buckeyes, I was like, there's no way in hell. No way. But yeah, that was exciting. Another thing he talked about was Justin Fry's Ohio First strategy for offensive line. I think that was very interesting, because we're going to lose Gerby Lambert to Notre Dame. Brandon Baker is kind of on life support at this point. What do you make of the Ohio First O-line strategy? I mean, we have 4 commitments from Ohio, which is great. And I know that, people point out, we missed on these Ohio guys. And a lot of those Ohio guys that we missed on, frankly, stink, or they never were any good anyways. And we took national guys, which is, again, it was always funny to me that people would bang on Stud for missing Ohio guys, but they don't miss on Brian Hartline for missing Ohio guys. And they're both landing 5 stars. But what was your thought on the Ohio First O-line philosophy?
Well, yeah, I've been a proponent of it. So, I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense. But it does beg the question: is Ohio State kind of out of the national lineman market? Because you look at these national linemen that are coming out, and a lot of them are, releasing their top 8, top 10, top 12 lists, and Ohio State's not even on the list. Let alone being left at the altar or missing at the wire. We're not even on the list. So I think Fry is absolutely committed to it, and for me, I think it's sensible. Again, I've talked about this before, but I would take this one step further. I would do the BYU strategy of
Oh.
expanded NIL for Ohio high school lineman prospects. Give them NIL deals equal to a year's tuition, and load up on 8 or 10 additional kids that really want to go to Ohio State, but you wouldn't normally have room under the 85 scholarship, but you can do it via NIL. And I'd load up on Ohio prospects, and I'd end up with the best offensive line in the country year in and year out, almost like the way that Nebraska used to do it back in the glory days when they were pharmaceutically ahead of everybody else. And they used to get all those linemen from Nebraska and allegedly roid them up and put those monster lines together. But that's if I was Ohio State, I would NIL it up, get these prospects in, circumvent the 85 scholarship rule, and build some super offensive lines.
Well, I mean, something I would do is I would just try to take 7 every year. Take 5 scholarship, do 2 with the NIL deal with the sweeteners, and go get Ben Roebuck and go get Luke Hamilton. They're 2 Michigan commits that grew up as Ohio State fans. All of a sudden, you get those guys. That cripples Michigan. When you start taking these guys that are fringe guys that you don't go on, you don't offer, excuse me, they end up at Michigan. I'm telling you, I think that's the way to do it with offensive linemen. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Offensive line is the hardest position to evaluate, anyways. And now, with limited contact in OSHA, which is the Ohio High School Athletic Association, limited contact across the country, we don't have spring football. It's hard to evaluate these guys. I'm telling you, they've never needed more conditioning. They've never needed to get stronger. They've never needed more contact. And back in the day, we would hit in practice. It was physical. So when I got to Ohio State, I was far from a developed product, but I knew how to run block. I could come off the ball just because that's how I was coached in high school. Now these guys are barely allowed to have contact during 2-a-days, which is crazy. And they don't even have 2-a-days anymore. They just have singles. So it trickles all the way up to the NFL because at Ohio State they don't have as much contact as they used to. So I think that the quality of the line play at all levels of football has gone down. The skill guys has gone up actually, just because there's so much machinery like the Monarch, which is that jugs machine, and there's all these training doohickeys for receivers, running backs, quarterbacks. But for linemen, the only way you get better as a lineman is by hitting a defensive lineman, and doing double teams and that type of thing. And you're literally not allowed to do that anymore. There's no more 2-a-days. It's all single days. So, it's you got to take more guys, and you just got to churn the room. I mean, with the portal, Michigan has just been magnificent with the transfer portal. They took the kid that won the Remington out of Virginia as their center last year, and then they got a really good center out of Stanford this year. I mean, they took 3 transfer portal guys, and I think at least 2 of them are going to start from this year. And that sprinkles in with the all Big Ten guys they already had coming back, and Zinter and the other tackle. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's always a topic every week about recruiting and O-line recruiting. And sometimes, in Justin Fry's defense, you're at the mercy of what is in the state of Ohio, in a given year, because sometimes you don't have Paris Johnson in the state. You don't have a Jackson Carman or whoever. And, it's funny because when we lost Jackson Carman, we got Nick Petit-Frere, who was actually a better player than Jackson Carman. He's a guy that started every game as a rookie. And he was a better player as an All-American at Ohio State. So, again, I don't think that geography matters. I mean, because with Ohio State, the way we're recruiting nationally, I think that, we just got to keep doing a better job of getting some of these national linemen. The last point he had, it was very interesting. And this is one that I hadn't heard, but it was interesting. We talked about, some of the traditions fading a little bit. And I don't know, how important is it to you, Nevada, that the players and the coaches know the traditions of Ohio State, or do they just need to be straight mercenaries and great coaches? Does that matter to you? And do you think that that's kind of caused a little bit of the decay of our performance in the game over the last 2 years?
Well, I mean, I think Ohio State's a special place, and I've always. Well, let me take a step back. First of all, for the record, I'm happy we have Ryan Day. I'm glad we have Ryan Day. I'm happy we have Ryan Day. I think Ryan Day can be wildly successful at Ohio State. Having said that, the fact that he has no Ohio ties or no connection to Ohio State football or Ohio State football, is that's a something to me, and it's not just some sort of just esoteric concept. It's about understanding the importance of the game, how it's not just a game, it's just not another game, it's just not the traditions of Ohio State are so important because of all the great players and coaches and people that have come before you. And I think that being honorable to that stuff is part of being the steward of Ohio State football, which is a head football coach. So I wonder if the game, you know, if it's lost a little bit of importance to us, and I'd like to think that that's not true. I'd like to think that these are just a series of kind of random events, because look, sometimes you lose football games. Yeah, and it's like fighters lose fights, and basketball you lose basketball games, and baseball you lose baseball games, and I can think about 20 events I've been involved in that we lost, and it's just inexplicable that we lost, but we lost. And
Mhm.
so sometimes that just happens. And so sometimes you don't want to read too much into it. But, I do wonder, I think Ohio State, for the people that I talked to at Ohio State, it just feels a little different under Day than it has under Meyer, under Tressel, under Bruce, where but I think getting a guy back like James Laurinaitis is a real step in the right direction, because I think that's kind of a connection to your past. And people talk about that stuff, and I think at Ohio State, given the fact that you've got a head coach who doesn't have those Ohio ties, I think guys like James are so important to the program because he's Mr. Buckeye. And I think he's a guy that that you can when your DC isn't from Ohio State and other guys on the defensive staff aren't from Ohio State, I think having a guy like James around is important. So you know, I think it's a something. I think it's an interesting topic to talk about, an interesting thing to consider. And the good news is I think Ryan Day knows that, and I think the James Laurinaitis hire is a recognition of the fact that he needs to connect to the past of Ohio State to build the future, and I think he's doing that.
Yeah, I always wonder about this just because there's a couple things here. Like we're growing up in the '90s when you were a kid in Ohio, it was brutal to be an Ohio State fan, and most of us were Ohio State fans, like AJ Hawk and Rob Sims. You grow up in Ohio, you're an Ohio State fan. So when you lose to Michigan every year, it really sucks, and it kind of gets like that hatred just kind of gets entrenched in your mind, just because you can't lose to those guys. And Trush shows up in '01. They go up there and beat them, even though the team as a whole stunk. They had like I think they were like 7-5 his first year. The next year they obviously won the national championship. They beat Michigan again. '03 they lose, and then he just runs off like 10 and like 7 or 8 in a row. From '04 to 10, he wins every time. So I think that a part of it is that I think that our national recruiting hurts the kids understanding the rivalry. And I think a lot of it is because a lot of these coaches don't understand the rivalry. So they don't get how important it is. I mean, they can say it, but is it really as authentic as when Urban worked for Earl Bruce? Jim Tressel worked for Earl Bruce. Like they were both born here. And again, I think Ryan does a good job. I think he's really, he's embraced the traditions and he knows them. But is it truly, to the level that Urban had it at? Probably not. I mean, he never lost one. Tress lost one in 10 years. So I don't know. And there was always this thing where like, well, Tress never played against good Michigan. I'm like, well, that '06 team would have killed any of these Michigan teams, these last two Michigan teams for sure. And Urban, beat that team in 16 and that team in 18. I mean, they were favored in 18. They were the number one defense in the country. And it was like one of those where, well, they're obviously not very good because, we hung 62 points on them in the horseshoe or whatever, which was good enough for Urban to hang up the whistle and retire from college football. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing because, like, I don't feel like there's that kind of nationalistic pride that comes from being an Ohio person that you hate Michigan, you're from Ohio, you grew up a Buckeye. when you're recruiting kids from. And again, you have to go get kids from all over the country because the talent isn't nearly what it used to be in the state of Ohio. Like in the '02 class that we broke down a few years ago, or a few weeks ago. I mean, you had Maurice Claret, you had Zwick, you had Troy Smith, you had AJ Hawk, you had all these first round picks, all from the state of Ohio, and it's just simply not like that anymore. The talent isn't there comparatively. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think that the guys get it, but they're going to get hammered with it. And I'm telling you, like this year up in Ann Arbor is going to be, if he pulls that one off, that's going to be his signature win because that is going to be an inferno to walk into because that team's really good up there and they're confident. And they hadn't been confident in 20 years, but now they're confident because you let them win a couple times. They spank you twice in a row. They're the confident bunch, and I worry about the confidence level of our guys just because, I mean, it's real in the field, man. I mean, you lose a couple of those, and you hear about it nonstop, and it should tick you off. But we'll see if the results come to roost because there's nothing better than winning up in Ann Arbor. Nevada, we're gonna talk captains. Do you have a prediction for the 2023 Ohio State captains? As we get into camp, they usually name them like the middle of camp or so. What's your prediction for captains this year?
Well, I think you saw it. I think the three guys. If I was picking the captains, I'd say it's the three guys that were sent to media days plus Tommy Eichenberg. I mean, that would be the four captains for me. Two on the defensive side, two on the offensive side, and call it good. Now, I don't know. Are they going to go six captains? Are they going to go eight captains? Whatever it is. But if I was going with the four, that's the four that I would, choose. If I'm going to six, maybe I'm including, Donnie Jackson in there and maybe throwing on the defensive side, maybe throwing Steel Chambers in there.
Yeah, I always wonder if they go to six, like do you do different levels? Like do you because I thought of Steele, but then I thought maybe Lathan Ransom just because you have the guy in the back end. Then you have the guy kind of at the front seven. Then you have the O line guy. Because again, for whatever reason, the O line hasn't gotten nearly as much love in the captaincy recently. Because I thought Paris was a shoo-in for captain last year, and he didn't get it. Everyone knew he was 3 and out, but he is. Paris is like a 35-year-old in a 20-year-old's body. Like he's one of the most mature kids you could ever dream of. Highly productive, top 10 pick. And strangely wasn't a captain, which was really bizarre. But yeah, I agree with you. I would go. I think they'll do 6 captains. I'd say Donnie, Marvin, Cade. Those are like Marvin and Cade are locks. Donnie is pretty close to a lock. I think I've heard some amazing things, and honestly, I think every day that he's not playing left tackle is a wasted day because I think he has to play left tackle this year. The more I watch some of the film, then I'd go Lathan, Tommy, JT. I think if there's a guy that I feel the worst spot in that group is probably JT. Maybe Lathan. I mean, I again like Tommy's a senior. Tommy's a lock. Tommy and Cade and Marvin are the 3 locks to me. And then it could go a lot of directions if you want to have that many third-year juniors as captains. I think it's kind of hindered us a little bit that we've had such young captains. Like we had CJ as a captain's redshirt sophomore. It's tough because normally a redshirt sophomore has got 2 more years to go before he's even considered as a captain. But these guys go pro so early and so frequently that you don't have time to wait around and make them a captain when they really should be. So it'll be interesting. Put your captain choices in the comments. I put that at the beginning of the show. But yeah, I think it's going to be good. I think that the line, the guy that I keep hearing a lot of buzz about in the WAC is Devin, like Devin Brown, because again, the linemen like to block for a mobile quarterback. I'm just telling you. And when they get into these scrimmages, we don't make the quarterbacks live anymore, but we used to back in the day. That mobile guy is huge because you miss your set or a guy beats you, and like when you have a guy like Troy that can scramble away and get rid of the rock. I mean that's huge, and again there's gonna be moments in time where guys up front are gonna miss their blocks. They're young, they're inexperienced. And they're not young from an age standpoint. They're just young from a career experience standpoint. So when you got a guy with wheels like Devin, I think it helps, and I've heard that from numerous people inside the Woody Hayes. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. How do you see the quarterback race shaking out?
Well, I just think it's going to be I just think it's impossible to say right now. I think it's going to be one of those ones that goes back and forth, and I still believe it'll start with McCord, but if I was betting, I'd say it starts with McCord and it ends with Brown. I just think it's that would be my gun to my head prediction. But McCord could come out and throw for 490 yards game one and never look back, and that would not shock me either. So, but I think McCord gets the first snap, barring injury, because he's just been around every time that they've gone to a backup, they've gone to him. He's the guy who started game. Yeah, no. So I think he's got to be the guy that they've got to give him every opportunity to be successful. But if he's not, Devin's going to be chomping at the bit. And then don't sleep on Lincoln. I know that's crazy. I know he's from South Dakota, but there is no one that I've heard more good things about over the summer than Lincoln Keenals. Nobody. And that's
Okay.
from players, that's from staff, that's from conditioning people. They all love this kid. And that was shocking to me when I kept hearing his name. So he's somebody I'm going to be watching very, very carefully come fall football because, look, stranger things. If Joe Burrow could go from I'm leaving Ohio State to greatest college quarterback in history and $100 million a year guy or whatever he's going to be in the NFL, then Lincoln could be the starting quarterback at Ohio State. That would not shock me as much as the Joe Burrow situation did. So something to keep an eye on. He's a crazy athlete, can do it all. And if you're looking for a guy who's got athleticism, can throw and can run with reckless abandon, and has got the vertical leap to go windmill dunk, that would be Lincoln. So that's my wild card dark horse to keep an eye on. It's kind of like you called Quinn Ewers to start a game at Ohio State when he wasn't even on the roster yet. One of the great calls of all time by Burt Carton. But no, my Lincoln dark horse. Keep an eye on him because he's awful good.
That was a good call. Especially when they told him he was going to start the Akron game, and then they ended up giving it to McCord. So that was already in motion. So again, there was a lot of tomfoolery. Quinn looks really good. I'm excited to see what he does at Texas. I'm really excited to see what he does down in Tuscaloosa because that's going to be probably the early season game of the year because Texas is pretty loaded coming back, and they got to go to Bama. Bama's got a lot. Bama's always going to be Bama with Nick Saban at the helm, but you got Tommy Reese down there, trying to run that offense, and you can already see the visual of Nick Saban screaming at him on the sideline and doing that whole deal. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes. But yeah,
Now, who was the guy that Ohio State traveled over Quinn Ewers? What? Come on, I keep forgetting his name.
Jagger LaRue. He transferred to play for Coach Prime.
Jagger LaRue. Let me just say one more time with emphasis. That was the dumbest thing in the history of Ohio State football. And anybody tries to defend that, I don't have words. They traveled Jagger LaRue over Quinn Ewers, and then you wonder why Quinn Ewers transfers. I think would I like to have Quinn Ewers on the roster right now at Ohio State? Yeah, I'd like to have Quinn Ewers on the roster right now. So anybody celebrate? Oh, we don't need him. We don't need the ball. Yeah, we could use Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers would be a nice addition to Ohio State. He's probably going to be a top 5 draft pick in the NFL draft next year. Um, he's just a terrific talent. But they traveled Jagger LaRue over Quinn Ewers, and I I have no words.
I have no words either. I mean, he's like I said, it is what it is. I mean, it's over. But yeah, like if we had Quinn this year, it'd be the number one team in the country consensus probably. I mean, I couldn't imagine if we had Quinn throwing to Marvin and Emeka, and that was the whole reason he came up early. Is because I said, hey, get out, give that second team, start throwing to Marvin. He's gonna be your guy, and then as you guys grow together, you're gonna be throwing it to him. And oh my god, I can't even think about how if we had him throwing it to Marvin. But it is what it is. Like he'll do fine at Texas. He's done really well down there, so I'm excited for him. Looking forward to seeing how the Longhorns do this year. So, got any final thoughts? We wrap this thing up, going down memory lane a little bit.
Just close to 20,000. I mean, we're close to 20,000 subs. Getting very excited about that. We're going to have a Jagger LaRue 20,000 subscriber party when we hit the 20,000 thing. And Jagger LaRue, every time we say Jagger LaRue, we'll do like a shot or something like that during the thing. And we'll just like tear it up during the podcast or something like that. That'll be the secret word. We'll scream Jagger LaRue every time. And everybody on the board has got to do a shot of whatever their favorite beverage is at the time, and we just go crazy, tear the place down.
Yeah, thinking of that, I'm gonna be doing shots of battery acid, I think. But
Yeah.
no, I'm excited. Oh, by the way, Scoop Golf Outing. If you guys are members of BuckeyeScoop.com, golf outing is coming up next Monday, Tuesday. Probably the best day of the year. It's a blast. Got a couple special guests coming. You're gonna have to show up to see who they are, but it is gonna be fantastic. I'm really excited about it. So.
You get to see Bill Greene's golf game out there. Bill plays 100 rounds a year, man. You get to see him out there stroking the ball out there.
I think so. I mean, we're gonna have the Menace guys are gonna be there. So I'm not
Oh,
golfing. I got a
nice.
bunch of you guys that aren't golfing, but we're gonna have a pretty big crew up there. So I'm really excited about that. So some special guests are gonna be there. So if you're a member of the Scoop, let's roll in. I love I love the comments. Brass tacks, what's up, my man? So we'll wrap this thing up. Any comments, Nevada?
Nah, I think that's. I'm just going to jagged LaRue my way on out of here and go back to the message board and jump into the helping technician thread and talk to some folks tonight.
Sounds good. All right, bro. That being said, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. It was great to talk about Media Day. Media Day is a wild time. These kids are going to be walking into a little bit of shrapnel. I'm sure that the media probably won't be ultra kind. The Buckeye beat will be, but the national media that shows up there, they're going to know all about that Georgia game, all about that Michigan game, this year's Michigan game. So it'll be interesting to see how those guys react to that. With that being said, appreciate you as always. If you enjoyed this content, please leave us a like. Click that little thumb. Helps us out tremendously. Also, click subscribe. Send this podcast to any of your Buckeye Nation friends, family, cousins, sons, daughters, uncles, nephews, grandparents. Again, I appreciate you guys spreading the good word because it's all happening because of you. So thank you so much. If you enjoy our live content, please click that little bell. You'll get an alert when we go live and you guys can interact with us on the show. We love talking to you guys. In the comments, shout out where you're from. I want to see where you guys are watching from. Again, I love when you guys do that. It's always fun to see where you guys are tuning in from. That being said, thank you so much, Buckeye Nation, and thank you, Scoop family. I will catch up with you guys tomorrow. Go Bucks.